Well, hi all and welcome back. Here I am in my conservatory, as I don't have a studio anymore, unfortunately. We have the diggers in and work's underway on that, which is probably a good thing, but I haven't had a chance at the moment to go and get the room downstairs sorted out, which I'm going to be using as my new sort of lair, so to speak. So yeah, I'm stuck in the conservatory, which is a bit awkward because it's very, very bright in here and there's not much I can do about it. Anyway, I thought I would just sort of check in and let you guys know, if you're interested, what I'm doing with my gear, as I'm beginning to do a little bit more video work now, and the whole hybrid thing is just beginning to kick in. And I've had a few issues over the last sort of few months with my previous cameras, and I've sold a bit of gear and I bought some new stuff. My original cameras were the A7R III and the A9, and I loved those cameras. They were absolutely superb. One complemented the other really, really well, and I had a really good high-res one and a really good one for action. Couldn't fault them at all, absolutely perfect. The only issue I really had with them was with the video side of things, and whilst they would take video, or they would do the video thing, I did have lots of problems with overheating, and yeah, just generally speaking, the A9 had no profiles. The autofocus in video wasn't great with the A7R III. Yeah, so I really started looking around and thinking, well, perhaps I ought to consider maybe some more cameras or different cameras. Yeah, and that led on to changing some lenses and other bits and pieces. So yeah, things have changed quite a bit now. I did have my name down quite early for an A7 IV, which I traded my A7R III in very, very reluctantly, and that has been actually surprisingly good. I was kind of a bit nervous about the whole thing, especially reading some of the early reviews, and some people saying it had overheating and some people saying it was fine and this, that and the other, blah, 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 slow readout speeds and all that, but actually it's worked absolutely flawlessly for me. It seems to have coped with everything I've thrown at it. Massive improvement with the video, which has been great. 4K 50p for me has also been very useful. So yeah, I mean, all in all, having those profiles and other bits and pieces, I feel that was actually quite a good move. So I was keeping the A9 to run alongside the A7 IV. However, the A9 has actually gone now as well, and that was awful to just sell that one. That was just dreadful. But I had to do that mainly because with video sometimes you need to have two cameras, and very often I'd have a main camera and then something to the side so there'd be another angle of view. And the A9 just wasn't great for that sort of stuff. It was fine for sort of small clips and things, but it wasn't brilliant, and not having a flip out screen and other bits and pieces, I decided to actually very reluctantly move that one on, and looked around for something to replace it, which actually there wasn't a great deal of choice, to be honest. It was either another A7 IV, A7 III, or an A7C. The A1, which obviously I'd love to have, and I will have one day, that simply was out of the picture financially, especially with all the building work going on here at the moment. So I picked up an A7C, again with a little bit of trepidation, thinking it would be slightly rubbish, but actually that camera has been fantastic. Very few overheating problems, a bit more video centric than the A7 III. Does profiles. I think you can even do 4:2:2 with it if you output externally, so loved all that. Love the fact that it also has, like the A7 IV, has the gyroscopic information in the EXIF. Now that is really, really useful, because then you can use it with Catalyst, and you can stabilize your footage that way. Works brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So the A7C has been great, and actually I'm using it right now. Very, very straightforward camera to use, nice small compact size. Actually reminds me, like it's meant to, of course, of the A6000 series. And I remember before I moved one of those on, I had one of those, I think it was a 6300 I had for a long time, and it got used loads because I always had a lens on it. It's always set up in the studio, and it got loads and loads and loads and loads of use. Anyway, so they're my two cameras. I still miss the other ones terribly, but I really can't afford to have a set of cameras just for stills and a set of cameras for video use. these two get well used, and that's been quite a good move. But of course, doing more video has changed some things around with lenses and stuff. As a stills photographer, I tend to do sort of equine photos. I do portraits and other bits and pieces. So I'm tending to use sort of telephoto lenses, you know, at the long end, which is great. And then I also do some sort of interiors, exteriors, that sort of work. So I'm going the other way and then using some wides and stuff, you know, 16 to 35s, etc., etc. I very rarely actually used sort of that middle, sort of, you know, 35, 50, sort of 85 maybe type things. Maybe the 85, yeah, but certainly the 35, 24s, not really, not a great deal. But with video, I'm finding that that gap is exactly what you want. You need to have that gap covered, 24 to certainly to sort of 50, 60, something along those lines. So it's prompted me to actually have a look at my lenses and to see what I needed. And the other big thing as well is certainly where my wide lens was concerned, my super wide, the 12 to 24G, that's the f4 version. Of course, you can't put ND filters on it very easily. And that's actually a must for video. So things like filters make a big, big difference. They do for stills as well, but it's essential. I'm using an ND filter in here because it's so flippin' bright. But you know, you need to have those, and I didn't really have any of that stuff. Well, I managed to go and have a look at my lenses, and I had decided on moving some on and then replacing them with certain things. And some things I've got right, and I think some things I've got wrong. So here we go. I'm gonna just let you know what I've messed up and what I think I've got right. So for my long lens, which is my wildlife type lens, I mean, I don't do any wildlife videography, but I obviously have a 200 to 600, which is kind of in sort of standard. Fantastic lens, brilliant. So that was really easy, great. Then for my mid-range zoom, which is going to be used for sports and also for portraits as well, videography, for the long lens, I mean, certainly for the hockey that I do, I upgraded my 70 to 200 Mark I for this one, which is the second version of this lens, and I have to say this has been stellar. It's stellar for video, it's stellar for stills, and in fact it's my go-to lens now for portraiture. I do not have an 85 anymore. I moved that one on as well. I have the Sigma one, the DG-DN 85, which is a brilliant lens, by the way. Certainly not moved it on because it's no good, it's fantastic. However, this lens just does it all for me, and I can live with the 2.8, and if I want to go and have a bit more of a blurry background, whatever, I just move backwards and use a longer focal length and have a different perspective, aka compression. There's a light gone again. Anyway, this is a stellar. Stellar lens. If you are thinking about upgrading or thinking about just buying one, it's fantastic. You have 4 lenses in one, sharp at all apertures. It's just an incredible bit of kit. So, yeah, that was easy. That again, no brainer. So that's great for video as well, because you also have the aperture ring on here, which is very useful. Then it gets a bit more complicated because I don't really have a lot of those sort of lenses that in that mid bracket. I do have the 24 to 105 f4. That's a really good one. That has OSS as well, which is really nice. So it's stabilized. So if you're going to be doing perhaps some handheld video or whatever, that's really, really useful. It's not the quickest of lenses, and it's quite hefty, but it's very, very good in terms of image quality, very useful for video as well. The only caveat with that is if you're going to be using 4K 50p on the A7 IV, you have that 1.5 crop, which means your 24 becomes sort of 36. So it's not brilliantly wide, but it's still handy to have. That's going to be staying here for a long time. And then I've got my wide, because I had the 12 to 24, as I said, and I've moved that one on. And I opted for a 20mm f1.8G, absolutely cracking lens. I did consider the 24 GM, however, again with the crop factor on the A7 IV for 4K 30p, no 50p, let's get it right. This becomes 30mm, and I'd say it's a little bit wider and a bit more useful. It's also very good for stills. very good for astrophotography, those sort of things, which I still do a little bit of, and I want to do a lot more of that sort of thing anyway. So this thing is great. It works perfectly for Catalyst as well. So if I'm shooting handheld, I can turn all the IBIS off and everything else in my camera, and then run the whole thing through Catalyst. Catalyst then crops in and it stabilizes all the footage. So a 20mm again becomes a very useful 30mm. So that's been great. I wanted also something a little bit longer. So I have invested in the lens I'm using now. I managed to get a second-hand 35 1.8. That has been brilliant as well, in fact. It was one of the best buys. That was a real bargain, that one. Nice and sharp, very fast autofocus. And it's great with these things, especially with this one as well, actually, because you can use clear image zoom. So effectively my 35 1.8, if I punch in 1.5 times on clear image zoom, it becomes a 52.5 1.8. And same with this one again, this one becomes a 20, or it could be a 30 1.8. Clear image zoom, if you don't know much about it, is an absolutely brilliant algorithm that Sony uses, and it's great for Sony cameras because you can get essentially 2 focal lengths out of your camera, and it's practically lossless. I can't really tell a lot of difference when I use it or not. So that's been incredibly useful as well. And then of course, looking at the internet and other bits and pieces, Sony suddenly decided to go and release this rather interesting 16-35 f4.PZ lens. Well, I have quite a bit of credit left at my camera store that I have for trading bits and pieces in. So I have pre-ordered that one. I think for gimbal use and such like, it's going to be absolutely brilliant. And again, with that clear image zoom, you've got everything from 16 to 52.5 at f4. So with the internal focus, with that power zoom, which is controllable by your camera, I think that's going to be an absolutely awesome bit of kit. So one of those hopefully will be winging its way to me in a couple of months or whenever they arrive. Meanwhile, this is the kit that I'm using. This whole video malarkey is just a bit of a bottomless pit, actually, when you start thinking about lenses, crop factors, having to have maybe 2 angles or something, which requires having 2 lenses of similar focal lengths maybe. Yeah, it's a minefield, and I haven't even started on the audio yet. At the moment I'm just using Sony's own mics. This is their Bluetooth wireless mic, and I have their sort of shotgun EC1B, whatever it is, mic as well. They're the ones I'm using, which seem to be okay for sort of YouTube, but for commercial work they're not going to cut it at all. So maybe once I've done a bit more research, I'll have time to do another video and talk about the audio side and why I've gone for whatever I'm going to get. And the same goes for lighting, actually. I mean, I've got a couple of SL60s, but they're okay, but not brilliant. So I'm going to have to look at that as well. This will all grow with me, but video is a whole new ball game, and whilst I'm very confident with stills, video, just going to have to see how that works. So probably my biggest regret with all of this would probably be selling my 16-35 2.8 GM, and I did that actually because I had a particular job where I needed to go wider than the 16, and I should have actually probably rented. Well, I definitely should have rented, I know that. But there you go, I sold that one. I mean, I actually now, weirdly enough, how it's all worked out, with the new 16-35 f4.PZ being announced, it's not a big deal, but I did kick myself at the time thinking, yeah, I really didn't factor in, I did not factor in the necessity for filters quite as much. I don't know why, because I still would have used a polarizer and stuff for architectural work and other things. But yeah, that was dumb. That was very dumb. Still, it's all worked out very well, and hopefully with a bit of luck, this new 16-35 will be with me soon. And yeah, fingers crossed it's going to be nice and sharp. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to go and get back and check on my builders, see what's happening, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Cheers.